Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Today, we're going to take a look at this weekend's full moon. It comes in on Sunday. This is a full moon in the sign of Libra, and it is obviously in Venus's sign, but it's also opposite Venus while Venus is finishing up its Cazimi with the sun. So a very interesting signature for this full moon. Let's take a look at it. So here we go. We're seeing the formation of this. Let's push it forward just a bit more. Okay, so here it is forming on Sunday afternoon, in case you're wondering. That's Sunday afternoon, March 28th. And here is the moon. Whoops. Let's see here. My drawing tool is a little messed up. Here is the moon opposite the sun, and what you'll notice is there's Venus just separating from the Cazimi. Now, some people will measure Cazimi a little bit differently. So some people will say this is already past. Some people will say this is still there because it's technically still on the same degree. So depending on if you read within a degree or down to 15 or 16 minutes of a degree, you will find that either way, the full moon is in Venus's sign and opposite its own host, Venus, while Venus is Cazimi, or just finishing its Cazimi. And now it's with an exalted sun in Aries, which is Mars's sign. So we have a Mars-Venus tension built in to this transit as well. So that you should feel the effects of not only on Sunday, but that will spill over a little bit. You'll be feeling that all the way through Monday before the moon finally leaves Libra late Monday evening into Tuesday, the 29th and 30th. So that's the basics of this transit. Now, the other thing that, oops, there's one more thing I wanted to mention. I closed this too early. Let me show you this part again, which is that as this is happening, the other thing that's taking place in the sky simultaneously is Mercury and Neptune are coming together. So there's a little bit of an underlying potential for unusual or very unique communication dynamics to take place during this time. They could be very inspired, imaginative, creative with Mercury and Neptune, like a singer-songwriter getting the inspiration, but also the potential for unclear or deceptive or illusory forms of thought or communication. So that's in the background of this full moon, and I'm going to be mentioning that as well. Now, what to watch for with this full moon? There's a few things. First of all, the Cazimi moment for Venus, I've already gone over in a previous talk, so be sure to check that one out from earlier this week. The potential for Venus at the heart of the sun is that, is that Venus is being reborn. It's a very powerful and auspicious moment for Venus. However, it's with an exalted sun, and it's in its exile or detriment in the sign of Aries, so it's a very Mars-like Venus. Well, what does a Mars-like Venus do? It receives this kind of perfected or ideal vision of what it wants or desires, or what is beautiful, or what is appealing or attractive. And it's also motivated to go after it because it's in a Mars-ruled sign with an exalted sun in Aries. So it's going to be action-oriented toward the ideal of beauty, or toward that which it is attracted to, potentially to its own detriment. That's a maybe in there. Now, then we have this very diplomatic moon in Libra that's full, that is going to be much more balanced, careful in considering the pros and cons, weighing options, careful intellectually or mentally to balance different factors before arriving at a judgment. And you're putting that full moon in an opposition to Venus. So what could you have? You could have diplomacy, tact, careful consideration, going up against a very hungry and action-oriented Venus that is high on a new ideal or principle that it wants to enact or move toward. So be careful. On the one hand, this moon in Libra could overthink something and be overly judgmental or careful and not take a risk that it needs to take. On the other hand, the opposite is true as well. If the Venus sun has you hot for something, right? And it's like, move forward at all costs, move toward this, move toward what you desire. Then the downside of it is that you could be racing after something too impulsively. It's like a gold fever. So, the Libra full moon may pull in the opposite direction and say, hey, wait a second, is this the wisest judgment? Have you made careful consideration of different factors and may pull back in consideration a little bit more? So those that's the tension. Now there's another tension that we could talk about around this full moon to watch for, and that is between the maiden and the mother. So trifecta of lunar archetypes that you'll sometimes hear, or goddess archetypes: maiden, mother, crone. The crone is going to be the wise woman later in life, third act of life. The mother is kind of like the second act of life, the one who cares for a family and a home, let's say, or doing mom while pulling other full-time duties. That's just a mother phase of life. And then there's maiden, which is more like the young girl, the one who's free, maybe unmarried, like the virginal goddesses. Doesn't have to be pure in any sense, but maiden would be either unmarried, whole unto herself, kind of a puella type of character. Now, all of these are contained within one another. So in the triple goddess form, you could say, just reflecting on my wife and how we've talked a lot about, how she's sort of in the course of our 10 years of being together, she's moved through maiden into mother, and there's, you always retain elements of both. And even as she feels that she's moving toward her crystal crone stage, the embodied wisdom of later life, that moving there, you don't lose the other two phases either. So just so you know, they're very fluid, and they can come and go at different stages of life too. It's not a linear progression. You could be 60 and be in maiden mode. You could be 25 and have something of the crone in you. So it's not like a linear thing either. But Venus tends to be the maiden, whereas the moon tends to be mother. And Saturn would tend to be the crone. Now, if just pure, of course, Venus in certain signs, the moon in certain signs, certain aspects, you could combine those or blend those. It's not a fixed or static thing. It's not like I don't want to make it sound like it's a cookie cutter formula here. But when the moon opposes Venus, you will sometimes have jealousy or competition between mothers and daughters, because you're going to have the maiden versus mother complex getting activated. When moon opposes Venus, you are sometimes going to have the youthful phase of life in its desire body leading the way, whereas the moon is going to be a bit more mature and careful and aware of multiple different relationships, like the ecological system of life. As the moon is more aware of that than Venus sometimes, especially when Venus is in like a hot Mars-ruled fire sign. So this is a potential maiden versus mother thing. You could see conflicts with friends, younger, friends who don't have as much responsibilities, or, and you sitting there going like, oh, I've got kids, or the types of tensions that can come up with women too, in particular. It's true, because I've seen it so many more times than I can count, that if someone is born with a moon opposite Venus, that they may encounter commonly jealousies, envy, competition with their friends, or between their sisters, or between themselves and their mother. So you do have to be careful of that tension as well as the need to be young and free in feminine go mode, Venus and Aries, versus kind of more embodied, careful, considerate, diplomatic, slightly more political looking, mother vibe in the sign of the scales or the balance. So triangulation is also, like, sometimes you're going to see, I also can't tell you how many times I've seen women who later in life go through a divorce, and then they have a major transit to their moon Venus complex in their chart. And they will go through trying to figure out what it means to be young again, single again, having, intimacy with a new partner again for the first time in a long time, things like that. So the question about youth and age, especially around the feminine body, which is in all of us, by the way. The feminine is an archetype that we all have, or at least, some people may not identify at all with a gender, or they may be almost like agendered or something. And I get that, that's fine. But for, most people who experience gender categories in their life, you'll know that to whatever extent you will experience the feminine. So this could be applicable to men or people who identify more masculine too. Like, watch for these feminine archetypes to be in dialogue with one another around the full moon. That's the basic point. Now, the other thing is that one of the conflicts between the maiden and the mother is also about caring for things outside of oneself versus being more self-contained. And the thought of what am I in relation to, who am I in relation to, and what does it obligate me to? Those are interesting conversations around this full moon as well. So anyway, those are just some of the things that I'm seeing around this upcoming full moon. I hope that this has been a helpful talk for you, just a little brief prep for the weekend's full moon. I hope you have a great weekend. I'd love to hear your stories in the chat box about what your experience of this full moon energy ends up being like, as well as Venus Cazimi. Remember that underneath the surface of this full moon, you've got Mercury starting to get into the conjunction with Neptune. We'll talk about that next week, but communication may play a role in this. There's a real romantic energy around this. That could be very motivating and inspiring, also potentially a little diluting. So keep that in mind as you're going through this weekend, and we'll return to that early next week as well. All right, that's what I've got for you guys. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take it easy. Bye.